one. Welcome, ladies, to another self love conversation. And again, you guys know that we are talking about Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I am here with another survivor, Miss Elizabeth, who is going to come and talk to us and just give us some insight about what we need to know to actually keep ourselves safe, keep our girls safe. You heard from another survivor just a short while ago. And so now Elizabeth is here to tell her story. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Absolutely. So, my first question to you is to let us know your story. Like, we've talked to many survivors. We know a little bit of the insight, but what specifically is your story as to how you got into the whole thing of human trafficking? How did you end up there?
So for me, I got lured into trafficking because of the trauma I had endured in my house, because of the childhood I was raised in, due to like the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, and also being in foster care. So I was literally high risk for trafficking when that happened. And during the time that I was trafficked, like there wasn't enough education being spread around. There wasn't people getting involved. Like we didn't even know at that time. I don't think it was even talked about, honestly. So I didn't even know what human trafficking was until I got clean and I completed a program called Women's Recovery Services. And then that's when I learned about trafficking.
And what is the story behind it? How old were you? And actually, like what happened? Because I was telling the other lady before we came on, people on the outside like us, we think it's one thing, right? We
Mhm.
think it's the white van. Be aware of your surroundings. Watch your kids on the internet. All this stuff. Where she was explaining, no, that's just a little drop in the bucket as to all the things that happen with human trafficking, right? So we know that there's a psychological aspect to it. Can you just explain in your experience what that psychological aspect was? It someone you knew, someone you didn't know? Was it a boyfriend, a friend?
So for me, like I explained before, like when that was happening to me, I didn't know what trafficking was. I assumed trafficking was being transported from one country to another. People assume that trafficking is where somebody's hopping in the bush. They
Yeah,
hop out, kidnap you, and then put you in a van and then sell
that's
you.
exactly what we think.
Yeah, it's a lot of that's what it is, and that's why they're so in denial about it's happening in your own backyard, like it's happening in your neighborhood, or
Right.
it's happening in your high schools. Like people are in denial around that, and so I'm really grateful for with all the presentations and people are advocating now about it. My experience was I was lured through a boyfriend, and so it was somebody that was he was 27 years old. I was 15 at the time when I met him, and he was my boyfriend, and he was a dad figure to me because I didn't have my father growing up, and so when I got with him, he was everything in one package, right? He was my protector because, like I said, I come from an abusive household. He was somebody that provided like protection. Somebody told me that they loved me. I was beautiful, bought me stuff. There was also that sexual dynamic. Like so, when we would have sexual intercourse, or he would sodomize me or have me do sexual favors, it was building that rapport. Like we were building that intimate relationship, right? And so that was another tie for him to have with me. And so there was just so many factors in this situation, and that's how I was able to get manipulated and lured into, and I was trapped and I was stuck. And people ask me all the time, how come you didn't just escape? How come you just didn't run away or call the cops or whatever? So prior to all of that happening, I had a bad experience with law enforcement because there was one time where me and my mother got into a huge fight. She poured chemicals over me and my body, and I called the cops on her. The cops came, and all they did was refer us to a social worker. They didn't arrest her. They didn't take me out the scenery. So it's like because of that experience, I didn't feel like the police was going to help me in any situation.
Right.
And so, and because of the abuse I was enduring in my household, I made a promise to myself. Being when I met the trafficker, I remember telling myself every day, I'm never going to go back to my mother's. So so being with him was like my only option that I thought I had at the time. And when I did, I eventually ended up going to my dad's house because, like I said, he wasn't in my life at that like that. So when I actually did go to his place, he was a drunk. So he wasn't able to be there and meet my needs and take care of me, right? So I just felt like this man was the only option. And so when I got with him, and then he would tell me, nobody else wants you. Nobody wants you. I have your back. I got you. And so that's what I'm saying. It was hard for me to get out of that situation and that mind manipulation. It's really hard.
Right, because you are how old at this time?
I was 15 and I
15.
yeah, I just turned 15. Yes.
Yeah, you're 15 years old, you meet
Mhm.
somebody who says they love you, you have that opportunity to feel love, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like the switch happens, right?
Yeah.
Where, you're asked to do, these different things and you think it's out of love too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I thought. And because I also talk in my other talks when, because of the abuse I had in my household with my mother, at the end of the night, she will hold me and tell me she loves me. And so that just gave me a mindset that abuse was normal. So when I got with this man and everything that was happening, at the end of the night, he would give me a bath. He would put me in the bathtub and wash my body. And I'm like, oh, well, this is normal. This is what had happened to my mom. So this is what love was. And I took that to my adulthood because when I was in abusive relationships, I needed those men to hit me. If they didn't hit me, then something obviously was wrong with me and they didn't love me. So I would do things so they can be violent, right? And that just made me feel love. So I had a whole sick concept of what love was.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's interesting because, one of the things that we express here, and, it's like, we wear the heart all the time because it's like the first person that we find out that we have to love is ourselves, right?
Yeah,
And once we start to love ourselves, that's when we can really start to stand up for ourselves and really set those boundaries. When you were going through that at 15 years old, what did you think about yourself? And how did you feel about yourself at that particular time? Did you feel like, nobody wanted you, or did you feel like you had something in you, but it was your surroundings that were holding you back? Like, what did you see when you look in the mirror, when you looked at yourself?
so at 15, when how I thought of myself was like I wasn't worth anything, you know. I was trying to do things or find people just to fill that void and that emptiness I had inside of me. um I didn't think I was gonna achieve anything. I didn't like I it wasn't like I had that mindset, well, oh, I know something's in me. I know there's some type of goal to me. It's just my environment. I couldn't even comprehend what that meant. All I could think of was I'm not happy. I'm miserable, like I'm hurting. Um, let me try to find the next thing that makes me happy and gets me distracted, right? And so I could never comprehend anything better than that. And then what I thought of myself at that time was this is no like this type of cycle was normal. The chaoticness was normal to me, And all I could think of at that time was I'm never gonna go back to my mom's. As long as I'm wherever I'm at, I would never go back because at the age of 16, I was arrested with an armed robbery case and under my trafficker because he had told me I needed to get him money because he was locked up. And so it was either that or sleep with Johns. And I chose robbing a lady at gunpoint. And
Yeah.
so when I did that, and that was because I was survivor mode. I was rather do that than sleep with these Johns because it's like that's not something a 16-year-old wants to do,
Right.
And so I did when I got arrested for robbery. They basically I gave them a fake name because all I can think of was I don't want to go back to my mom's. I'd rather give them a fake name. I'd rather figure out other ways, go to a group home, do something, rather go back to my mom's. And that's all I can think of at the time.
Hmm. And so, how long did it last with you and your trafficker?
Um, when I was being trafficked, so my first trafficker, it was over a couple years because I remember when I was 19, he was finally deported. And so there was a lot of the times he was locked up, but he was still manipulating me and talking to me on the phone. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like he was
yeah.
still telling me what I needed to do. He was sending people to me to like work with me, right? And so that's what I'm saying. He was still trafficking me over the phone. And that's because it was such a strong manipulation, strong mind. Like he had that mentality over me. And
Hmm.
so that would happen a couple years. At 19, he was deported, but I took that into my adulthood because that was a way for me to survive and make money. And so, but during that whole situation, when I was being trafficked by him, I was also being trafficked by a female, and that was his friend. she was the one that actually showed me hands-on what to do. And she was an older woman. She was in her 50s. So traffickers can be females as well. And
Yeah.
so, and I also want to put it out there that adolescents can be traffickers too, because I've worked with survivors in the past that was a 15-year-old. And so because of her being 15, her trafficker was 17, and nobody would believe that. Nobody could not see that. But the truth is, she was at one point a victim, but the fact that she didn't want to sleep with Johns anymore, her trafficker said, well, if you lure me and bring me some more girls, you don't no longer have to sleep with these Johns. They will, and you just watch over them. And so she did that, lured her best friend in, and now they start selling her best friend. And so now she's basically the trafficker. But that's because at one point she
Yes.
have to be, it can happen in our schools, it can happen in church, like it can happen anywhere. You just have to be open-minded, you know, and understand like where these traffickers are looking and who they're targeting, you know. And so and then my third trafficker happened when I got older. And this is I want to say I met him before I went to prison, and then just throughout the years he was giving me a large amount of dope to sell for him. And honestly, I didn't think that was trafficking, what was happening, but I didn't get clarity until later down the road when I was in recovery. And so when I found out what happened, like with that being trafficked, I was able to like work around that. So what he would do would give me a large amount of dope to sell for him. And I will be in debt with him. I will owe him so much money because I ended up smoking my dope, or somebody will rob me, because being a female drug dealer, you get robbed, you know? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I will bring him the money I did have and give him the money, and then he will give me more dope to sell. And before I can get out the car, I had to give him sex or oral sex. So that's just a form of trafficking, is you're basically giving sex in exchange for something valuable.
Absolutely. And so I know you mentioned in the story that you wrote for us on our blog that you did have a child, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And that was like the eye-opening part for you, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
now you have a child and now you get the opportunity to be a mom.
yes.
So when you saw that baby, what were you thinking at that point?
Well, to be honest, when I got pregnant with my son, I continued to use throughout my pregnancy because I couldn't stop using. I didn't know how to stop, you know. I just felt like, well, I didn't love myself, obviously. So how can I love this baby? And I thought he was a barrier. I thought he was blocking me from making money, and that was my mentality. And so I just continued to use. I was, with my kid's father, and he was very abusive. He would drag me across the room, 8 months pregnant, and beat me. I remember I was breaking into cars, robbing cars, and getting items to sell to get money to pay off what I owed my trafficker, or even just to use those money to survive. And I was big at this time when I was doing that. And so, but when I gave birth to my son, I did get clean a month before, because I did think like, okay, I don't want them taking away my son, you know? And so I gave birth to my son, but I took him back to that lifestyle because that was my way of living. That was what I knew. I didn't know any other way. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I didn't get that realization of having, caring about my son until I want to say I got arrested.
Okay. And I was about to say, what was the turning point for you where you was like, you know what? This has to change. Like I can't do this anymore. Like, you know, I mean, what was it for you?
So for me, the wake up point was when I got arrested for the last time. He was 3 months old. I had left him at a house, and I was with an informant, and I didn't know this guy was an informant. He was my friend. We were seeing each other, and I didn't know he was working for the police. And so when he set me up with the task force, they basically, pulled me in, and they said, you're going away for a long time because you're selling drugs. And I had a long record of selling drugs, right? And so I said, okay. And all I could think of at that moment was my son. I left him at a dope house, and I was going to go away for a long time, and I was never going to see him again. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I need to change my life around. So I already knew if I snitched, I was never going to be able to go back to the street. I knew that. And I was willing to do that because I wanted to change from that moment on. So I told the police who I was working for, and they took me straight to jail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then I know you started going to school and you went to
Yeah.
college and you started to change. Was the change
Yeah.
hard for you? Was the change hard for you? Because
It was.
that's fast money, that's fast money and now you got to get a job and the frustration is there.
Yes. It was hard for me, but it was I ended up getting 5 years for two different counties. So I did a pretty long stretch.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so So when I needed to be incarcerated that long so I can get it all out of my system. Because I'm telling you,
Right.
if I would have did like 4, 5, 6 months, I would have probably went back to the streets because I didn't get it all out of my system, and I would have went back to the same neighborhood, the same people. Kind of like when you go to the barber shop, you're gonna get a haircut, right? So it's like
Right.
if I'm going to the same neighborhood, the same people, I'm gonna go back to that lifestyle. And so I literally relocated to a whole different city, did my time in a whole different city, and then did that much time so I can be able to get it out of my system. And that's where I just learned. By the time I was released, I already completed a program. I got inside the jail. I got my GED, and I just knew within myself, because when in the beginning of my sentence of my term, I was fighting. I got to like 3, 4 fights, and I
Wow.
still had that mentality, but I knew I didn't want to use drugs. I just was still rolling with the same people, get into fights, the same mentality. But when I transferred to Sonoma County, that's where I was totally isolated, didn't know nobody, and I started being successful.
Yeah.
And then when I got out in 2013, I went to another program that just got me more strong in my foundation. And then I decided I wanted to give back. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna let all this wisdom I have go to waste.
Right. 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 Right.
Like, so I'm gonna go to school and get some more education. And that was really huge for me because I never put on any college campus, let alone graduate, because I got my GD incarcerated. I was a high school dropout, you
Right.
know. So I went to college, and that's where I just started to just blossom.
Wow. And
Hmm.
and I love your story because you can actually see the resilience in you too. Like I told the lady, because everything that you went through, it got you to this point,
Yeah,
good or bad. You are a voice, like you said, for the voiceless, the women who are out there who don't even know that they're being trafficked, especially these young girls, right? Who don't know that they're going, what they're in, right? Because it's not talked about like that. It's like really taboo, for
yeah,
real, right? It's really taboo. So
yeah.
now when you're out and you see these young girls, what do you see in them? Like, do you see the fear? Do you see the confusion? Do you see
Yeah.
all these things? And how do you help them? Because if most of them don't understand what they're in, is it do they go back to their traffickers? Do they feel comfortable there?
So I've noticed, with the patterns with the girls I work with, when they come out of that situation, it's true. They're afraid that their traffickers are going to come find them. They're afraid that people are going to judge them if they speak. They're afraid that they go to the police, they're not going to be heard. And so that's why, me and my partner, Lisa McQuaid, developed a support group in Sonoma County to where these girls can come to the support group and just kind of vent and get everything off their chest. Any burdens, any guilt, any shame, anything in their mind, they need to just lay it all out in the floor, right? They
Right.
let it all out, and we're there as guidance to tell them, hey, you should do that, or you shouldn't do that, or just kind of be their support system. And I've had where this situation happened where one girl decided to have the courage to file against her trafficker. And so she did that, and she basically, that person ended up having a court date, and it was like a whole big deal, right? And then
Right.
other girls seen her do that, and they started doing it too. So it's kind of like when one survivor does it, and every other survivor see it, it's like a domino effect. They're gonna go ahead and follow that path that survivor led. And so that's what I'm saying, like it is like that at first, but if they always have that constant support, especially somebody that's actually walked it, I feel like that they'll be successful.
Why are they afraid though?
So they're afraid because of the shame, of the shame, of the guilt, of not being heard. Like I said, if they get contact with the police and it doesn't fall through,
Right.
basically they're not being heard, that they feel like it's a waste of
Because the
time.
police are not trained either, basically,
Yeah.
to
No,
deal
that's what
with
I'm saying.
trafficking, because they
Yeah.
look at it as prostitution. So I was
Yeah.
discussing this with another person. So the police, instead of checking to see if this young lady is being trafficked, you would just take her to jail because you think that she's prostituting. You
Yeah.
think that she's selling drugs or she's doing
Yeah.
this. So you label them instead of checking in with them. So they don't have enough training, right?
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like they don't feel like they're going to be hurt, or they feel like they're, like you said, like they're going to do some
Gotcha.
time, for what they're being arrested for. Or like with their traffickers, the traffickers tell them, hey, we're going to hurt you, we're going to hurt your family, we're going to hurt your kids. So they have that fear instilled in them. Like with my third trafficker, he always told me if I ever got arrested and if I snitched or whatever the case may be, if I didn't pay him what I owed him, he was gonna get out because he knew where my dad lived. He was gonna go after my dad, or he was gonna hurt my boyfriend's parents. Like he put so much fear inside of me that it was hard for me to go to the police about anything. So
Right.
there is, and then now it's like I'm alive today. Like my trap, that guy hasn't came and looked for me. He was just
Yeah.
putting all that fear inside of me. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just baloney. You know what I mean? But we don't know that.
Absolutely.
So
And so I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked the previous lady. How hard is it for you to find love now?
honestly, like, cause I'm married now. I'm married,
Okay,
and
good.
my husband has 4 kids. I have one, so we have a 5 blended family. But it took a while to get to that point because at first, I was when I got out of treatment, I was still seeing different guys, and
Right.
that's because I was still trying to like fill this void, right? That it was so
Mhm.
ingrained inside of me. And so when I finally did get into a relationship with my husband, um, I had a lot of fear, a lot of trust issues, a lot of I like couldn't look him in the eyes. Like I had a hard time with that in the beginning. It's just a lot of stuff I had to work on because of my trauma in my past. So it was really challenging for me. But because of my healing process and the mentors I have in my life, and working the steps when I went to the rooms and did the meetings, I was working the steps around all of this. Um, it's just that's what helped me. It helped me to be able to be in a really good relationship.
Okay. Because I always wonder what the women, especially when they go through their healing process, how hard is it to trust?
Yeah,
You know,
super hard.
how hard is it to, and even if you're married, it's like the triggers. If you see things, if you hear things, if because every marriage is not perfect. So when you go through things, uh, the trauma on your side, the trauma on their side, right? Like, how do you actually mesh that together and have a good, healthy relationship coming from something where you were manipulated, but you thought was real?
Yeah,
You get it? You don't,
yeah.
so you would never know what's real or what's not unless you start to go through that healing process.
Exactly. And that was one of my fears. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if my husband was going to leave me or if he was going to cheat on me. I didn't know. Like I had so much fear because of my previous relationships. And
Right.
so and for money issues, I had a lot of trust around money. I didn't know this man was going to take all my money because of what was happening in the past, them taking my money. So it's like I had a lot of trust issues. And so I just want to say with all the therapy, I've done a lot of therapy. Um, like I said, I have a few mentors in my life, so it's just I worked around building that trust.
Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
let us know what you have going on right now.
So now I'm going to Sonoma State at it's a university for my bachelor's degree. I'm going to get my bachelor's this May. So I got accepted to
Congrats.
yes, I got accepted to
Yay.
Arizona State, and so Arizona
Oh,
the master's program in social justice and human rights. So I'm really
yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
And I applied for Berkeley, the master program in public affairs because I'm hoping like we'll see if that opens up because if that does, that's where I want to go because I
Right.
want to work towards changing training for law enforcement. Like if I have a master's in public affairs, I can literally go to legislation where all the bills and the policies are being made. And I can work towards, having trainings different, like a different perspective,
Right.
rather than, because I know they do trainings, but it's like I want them to learn from a more empowerment based, more victim centered based,
Yeah.
more trauma informed based, more compassionate based. I want the training to be more based like that, so these officers can know how to identify the difference.
And I think that's important because I heard some beer companies and some Fortune 500 companies are training their employees to spot human trafficking when they're on the road, when they're
Yeah,
transporting like the beer and the goods and the gas and all that stuff because
yeah,
they make so many stops,
yeah,
right? And to be aware and what they need to do. I know even at the center where I am, they'll hang them up in the bathrooms and they'll say, are you being held against your will? Is there anything? They kind of give you like these little things that you can read in the back of the bathroom. And if you can, call this number,
yeah,
so it is something that we still need to educate ourselves on and learn about. Because
Yeah.
again, like I said in the beginning, it is kind of taboo where you really don't know, because you thinking that these women, they want to be here, they want to, they want to do this stuff, where all along you're being manipulated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So give us your social media. How can we connect with you and support you and everything?
So, if anybody wants to connect with me, you can link up with me on Facebook, which is Minko Elizabeth Quiroz. So the last name is Quiroz.
Mhm.
Or you can connect with me on Instagram. So you can, it's Quiroz Elizabeth 2015. So Quiroz Elizabeth 2015. So that's how you can connect with me.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for being so candid. I loved your story. And please
Thank
let
you.
us know how we can support you in your group or anything. Okay.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the platform to be able to, share my story. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to come back, just let us know. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. See you
All right.
soon.
Bye. Thank you.